And so Jagmeet Singh really entered this debate not just as like a third wheel, but as the guy trying to jam a wrench into the spokes of this liberal conservative two-speed bicycle. The NDP has been bleeding relevance for what is pretty much years now since the pandemic. They've been basically relegated to moral support status in Parliament. Well, the real action, the real power is swaying between liberals and conservatives. And in this debate, you could really feel Singh's awareness of that in pretty much every word, every interruption, every jab, especially the English debate. He wasn't just, fighting for votes. He was fighting basically to prove that his party, and more specifically himself, he isn't obsolete. And really, from the moment that he opened his mouth, his tone was very different. He wasn't offering consolation. This was a version of Singh that was frustrated, cornered, and very clearly attempting to shift the energy and kind of swing the momentum. And just to go back to combat sports, because I feel like it's just very much a perfect analogy, it just, again, remind me of somebody in a fight down multiple rounds, needs a KO to win, showing, determination and showing what it takes to survive, but not doing what it takes to be successful. He was really determined to cut in, hold space, play offense. And in doing so, he finally did what many on the left in Canada have basically been begging him to do for years now, to identify the real enemies instead of letting decorum get in the way of clarity. And in combat sports, in the situation that I'm talking about, when someone's just getting brakes beaten off of them, what you always hear the commentators say is like, oh, they got a ton of toughness. But really all that is saying is that they don't have any brain. Toughness and heart doesn't equate to brains. You can have all the heart and scrappiness in the world, but if you're not meeting expectations in the lead up to the fight, in the lead up to the election, in the lead up to the campaign, when you had the chance to really show yourself, when you were put in the place to do the things that you said you were going to do numerous times over, your ability as a fighter, your ability as a politician, it easily becomes questioned because you ultimately allowed Trudeau to dominate until it was far too late to do anything that was going to have any effect. And now, essentially, you've set it up where the NDP is going to lose seats and the Liberals are going to gain seats from the NDP. And it's very much a shame because as far as like a debate performance, Singh's rhetorical targets were very clear. Mark Carney, the Liberal technocrat, moonwalking out of the shadow of Bay Street straight into Justin Trudeau's throne, and Pierre Poilievre, the self-styled man of the people who built his brand, yelling into his phone about gatekeepers. And for Singh, he very much knew that this moment wouldn't last long, so he swung, and he swung big. And that's the core of Singh's approach in this debate. In both of these debates, I felt like very much drawing a line from the typical kitchen table type of politics to a more, combative brand of politics, trying to remind Canadians that, well, the Liberals tinker and the Conservatives have their grievances. The NDP's pitch, it should always be based on people's material conditions. And that's not always the case. And because it's not always the case, it's not always effective. It's very much not effective. And often it's muddied by bureaucratic language and civility politics and parliamentary caution and decorum. But here, Singh really put it as blunt as he could. This time he actually said the quiet part out loud. Strategically, this was less a power move and more a survival strategy, with the Liberals holding their nose just above water as far as the polls say, and the Conservatives trying to chum the waters for a culture war feeding frenzy enough to turn the tide and make up for this incredible lead that they've given up. The NDP very much is just left to try and remind people that they are still even a party that exists and that they have a vision, and that they're not just Justin Trudeau or the Liberal Party of Canada's +1 at the legislative ball. But there's very much like an unavoidable tension there because Singh is playing a role that very much isn't his. He's stepped into this fight where the referee already has two fighters in the ring. And while he gets in sub punches, pointing out Carney's Bay Street history or Poilievre's love affair with deregulation, he still feels like the guy who's fighting on the prelims watching Carney versus Poilievre in the main event. Even Singh's strongest lines felt like they were delivered in the shadow of larger forces. He got personal, invoking working class realities, talking about mental health funding, price gouging, and the housing crisis. And yes, for a brief moment, it resonated. But the problem is definitely not Jagmeet Singh's sincerity. It's the framing. In a media environment that's engineered to spotlight either the ruling technocrat or the populist disruptor, Singh's pitch really ends up sounding like a minor key version of both. From the perspective of a moderate centrist, which I know, like, who really cares what they think at this point, but I'm just pointing out that, like, from their perspective, this tactic very much seems like a type of aggression that's like a calculated tactic, but it's more seen as like flailing, an attempt to claw back relevance. And for a party that once dared to dream of forming government, the NDP has very much retreated into what is now this survivalist politics. And Singh's firebrand performance might energize the base, but the broader electorate has been basically conditioned to see the NDP as either the conscience or the coalition partner in the House of Commons, not a real contender to hold any type of balance of power. And that's very much the dilemma, because like for Singh, to give him a little bit of charity, if he pulls his punches in this type of a debate, at this point, the left is going to just jump all over him. And then what's going to happen is he'll just fade into relevance, which at this point, it might have already happened either way. But apart from that, with him swinging as hard as he was swinging, he risks coming off as performative. And I feel like in this debate, he chose the latter, and that was very much the consequence of it to some demographics. And while it made for better television, it very much remains to be seen whether it's going to translate to any type of performance indicator on election day. I really don't think it's going to. And I think it's a tragedy. And the tragedy here is very much structural, because the NDP represents basically the only national party that's even pretending to offer an alternative to the neoliberal status quo. Again, the Green Party is very much worth talking about, but I feel like under Elizabeth May, it's just a bottleneck type situation that will never be reformed until she is no longer at the helm of the party. And every political mechanism, from the media cycle to the debate format to the first past the post system, which very much reflects itself. And it's built to crush that third party energy, just like it did in the debate, in the amount of time that each leader was able to talk. It crushed that third party energy. And luckily, for Blanchet, the Quebec separatism and the unique ability to hold the balance of power in Quebec is what made him stay relevant. But Singh very much had the vibe of yelling in an empty hallway, like screaming at the top of his lungs in a soundproof room. And while you have to respect his effort, I feel like at this point, the result is going to be worse. And he would have done himself so many favors by doing what he did a lot earlier in his political career. So yes, admirable that he came to fight. He came with tough lines. He came with fire. But the system isn't built to let that fire spread. It's built to contain it or just ignore it, to keep the conversation between the technocrat and the demagogue. Singh, his role is ultimately to remind people that other options do exist, even if the system makes sure that those other options stay options and have no real chance of holding any meaningful power.